Okay, recording is on, Betty.
Okay. I'm going to invite you back to the Transportation and Street Activity Permit Committee meeting for Manhattan Community Board 1. This is our February 2021 meeting. We will be following Robert's rules for the first 3 items. Community board members will be allowed to speak first, but then community members will be invited to speak. Excuse me. Once we get to congestion pricing group, that is a working group and members don't have to be community board members, and it will be open base for anyone who chooses to speak. I'm going to flip the agenda. If you go to the next item, next slide. Because we're still lacking quorum, we're going to start with agenda number 2, where no vote is anticipated, and so we can move forward with that item. So I'm going to invite Manhattan Deputy Commissioner. Sorry, my throat is bad. Michael, could you?
Oh, for sure. Yes, I'll turn it over. Don't worry, Betty. I always get a frog in my throat as soon as it's my turn to speak. So yeah, I'll turn it over to, I believe, is it Jennifer Steinitz? Yes. And do you have slides, or do I have? Oh, is it Santinez? I'm sorry. And do you have slides, or is there something in here that I can present for you guys?
Hi, Michael. We were just going to run through some verbal updates following our presentation from last fall. Thanks, Betty. Thanks, Michael. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jennifer Santinez. I'm DOT's Manhattan Deputy Borough Commissioner. Lucian and Betty had asked DOT to attend tonight's committee, and be prepared to share updates on our city bike infill plans. And so I did just want to start off by saying that just to remind folks that we presented to the committee back in November. And we shared with you our plans to increase bike share capacity across the district, but also across the larger existing service area to support our phase 3 expansion, where we're doubling the size of the city bike service area and tripling the number of available bikes. We see bike share as a safe and fast and affordable mode to get around the city, and believe it will continue to act as a critical transportation link during the city's reopening. Throughout the pandemic, the system has continued to see high ridership. On Community Board 1, from August to December of last year, users took approximately 490,000 trips. On a larger system-wide scale, over 60 million trips were taken from April to December of last year, with over 900,000 of those taken by members of the City Bike Critical Worker Program, which includes hospital and critical worker locations here in the CB1 district. So I'm returning tonight to offer additional information on the 4 sites that we presented back in November. And if you wouldn't mind, I'm just looking at a couple of different screens here to make sure I have all of my notes. So I will go and share updates one at a time. I know that a lot of concerns and questions were raised about our plans. Following our presentation, I briefed Borough Commissioner Pinkar. Our office worked with the bike share team to review all of the concerns that were raised. We evaluated some feasible alternatives when possible, and I'm just going to share some updates and a little bit more background on each of the 4 sites one by one. And so I'll start off with the Albany Street and Greenwich Street location that we were proposing adjacent to Port Authority, and that we coordinated with Port Authority actually for that site. So that's a roadbed site. We're looking at 46 stocks. We did hear that there was pushback around the narrow streets in the neighborhood, as well as general traffic congestion concerns and the city bike kind of expansion in this neighborhood further clogging our streets. We did take a closer look with our traffic engineers as well as the bike share team, and still believe that the roadbed site here is a fine site. And we are looking to move forward with this installation on the north side of Albany and Greenwich. We're going to continue to monitor the station after installation, see what adjustments could be made. But I also do want to note that our conversations in coordination with the Port Authority are continuing. And so we will be able to talk about other alternates in the area. I know that folks have raised concerns about opening Liberty Street, or just general concerns and suggestions on how mobility could be improved around the Port Authority network. And we hope to further clarify and work with our team at Port to see how we can improve and make any adjustments to the station after installation. For Fulton Street and Pearl Street, this was the POPs location where we were looking to install a station on the sidewalk. This is right by the Rite Aid entrance. We coordinated heavily with the developers and the property management Rockrose on this POPs location since it is on private property. What we're looking to do here is install for this POPs site is a kind of a 1-year pilot to see if city bike stations and POPs sites will work. We also took into account the concerns that we heard about kind of blocking up the sidewalk here and seeing what additional space perhaps on the roadbed could be available. We did take a closer look, but I did want to note that the Duane Reade here is still open. We coordinated this site with the building to ensure that no entrances were going to be impacted by this particular station location, and that we are going to continue to work with Rockrose if additional adjustments to this location need to be made following installation. Going on to the third site, which was Spruce Street and Gold Street. This was another roadbed site that we were looking to install outside of Pace University. I believe there were some concerns raised about the proximity to downtown hospital, as well as other congestion and kind of like traffic concerns. We did take another look and we reviewed the proposed placement here. And we worked with Pace to coordinate this site. We don't believe that there will be any impact to adjacent properties, as well as the loading and proximity to or ambulance access for downtown hospital. And so the university really supports the site and is excited to have additional capacity for their students and their workers. And we're looking, I asked our bike share team to also get some critical worker statistics for this location. While we don't have specific sites for this hospital, New York Presbyterian does have a high number of users that are part of that membership program. Over almost 2,000 of their critical workers have signed up for that program. So we do see a high ridership based on NYP workers that are going in and around the city bike service area. And last, we had Water Street and John Street, which was a roadbed site that was planned for about 40 docks. The site didn't really have too many concerns or questions that were raised at the November meeting, but we did take another look. We did our formal surveys, and for this one, there was adjacent construction. Our most recent survey showed that there was a bus stop relocation on the block due to that adjacent construction, and unfortunately, we won't be able to install a station on Water and John. So what we're going to do here is cancel this site because it no longer works for City Bike, and we are going to evaluate some additional alternates. Nothing is happening in the immediate term. We're looking at those alternates now, and we'll return to the board once we have that proposed site ready to share. And so I just wanted to stop there. Those were the 4 infill sites that we presented on. I know I had a couple of other outstanding bike share items to share updates on, but I will stop here for questions on City Bike infill.
Oh, sorry, Mariama.
Hi, thank you. So I think it's really awesome that you spoke to Pace. I mean, the community public engagement is always the most difficult part of any of these negotiations or workings. But I still question on Gold Street, on what side? Is it the Pace side that you're putting this stuff? And if not, did you also speak to the Southbridge board? I could see on Gold Street, maybe between Spruce and Frankfurt, on the Pace side, there could be space, but that's not where we had previously discussed, or my understanding of the previous discussion was that it was going to be closer to the hospital. Mm-hmm.
And hi, Mariama, good evening. Yes,
how are you?
Just to confirm, I'm hanging in there. I hope you're doing well.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. It is going to be, our plans are to install the station on the Pace side of the street, so it's north of Gold.
Okay.
Mhm.
So it would
And
be
so
like between Spruce and Frankfurt, as opposed to the previous presentation that specified the corner of Spruce and Gold.
So the station,
Right.
just to clarify, the station would be installed on Spruce Street.
Oh, on Spruce. Okay,
Mhm.
very good.
Correct.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Detta, you had a question?
Oh, I just wanted to thank her for the thoroughness at re-looking at each of those sites.
Thank you. And I guess that wraps up, I'm sorry.
Um,
Carrie, your hand
Brittany-
went up and down, did you?
Brittany also is having trouble raising her hand. Just wanted you to know.
Okay, by all means, Brittany is on committee, so,
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I don't have the feature to raise my hand for whatever reason.
oh, sorry.
It's okay. I just have a quick question. And I joined kind of late, so apologies if you've covered this, kind of about the sites that kind of come up and kind of come down. I noticed that there was a station on Wall and South Street that went away. Is there like a sort of seasonality to how docks are placed around the neighborhood? Or I was wondering if you could kind of speak more as to how stations kind of come and go in the neighborhood. I've seen this happen a couple of times.
Sure. Hi, Brittany. Good evening. And just to clarify, did you say Wall Street and what was the cross street on that station? Broadway?
South Street,
South Street.
right by
And I believe-
the ferry.
Gotcha. I think that station was relocated. That was a temporary site where we had to temporarily relocate a station for longer term construction. In terms of fluctuation and seasonality of station installations, right now, what DOT and LIFT is doing is, installing what we're calling infill sites. So that's new stations, expansions of existing stations to help with the increase of ridership and the growing demand for our phase 3 expansion, which is installing new stations into new neighborhoods in the outer boroughs. There really isn't a seasonality. For station relocations, those are typically due to upcoming construction and other conflicts with that type of work. I think if you had questions about certain locations, the City Bike and DOT, or the City Bike Twitter feed would have all of that information, as well as the City Bike online map, which show the current kind of online network of all active stations. Does that answer your question? Kind of bounced around a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's super clear. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you. And before Carrie, I just want to tell Lucian, could you move Pat Moore over to panelists? And then Carrie, if you'd like to speak. Are you muted?
Carrie, I got you.
Oh, thank you, Lucian. And thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate the that you came back and responded to the various concerns. I'm just a member of the public with an interest. And I'm on Duane Street, so that's been a conversation going on. So so this was more about the new stations. Do you guys have any updates on the I'm not sure if it's expansion or infill, which is which anymore, but the expansion of existing docks I think that's infill, right? So do you have updates on that, or is that going to be looked at separately, or do you have information about that?
Absolutely. Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Jennifer.
And Betty and Michael, I was going to turn over to the outstanding kind of City Bike items outside of the presentation that we gave in November. I'm not sure if you had other questions about those 4 sites. Otherwise, I'd be happy to address Carrie's question now.
I am fine. Michael, are you okay with her moving on?
Yeah, I'm fine. I don't see any other hands up, so.
Please feel free.
Thank you. And Carrie, this is exactly where I was going to next. And so I did want to bring up the Duane Street relocation requests and kind of concerns that were raised on that block. in terms of parsing out what is expansion versus what is infill, let me start there. So what we're calling expansion is actually the installation of new stations into new neighborhoods. So that's what's happening in the Bronx and Queens and Brooklyn, as well as Uptown in Manhattan. And so we're going, at least for the Manhattan sites, we're going further into CB12, north of 184th Street in the coming weeks. And so that's very exciting. For infill, that's what is specific to what is happening in the existing service area. And so that is the increasing of capacity of docks, whether that be by installing new stations like the 4 that were presented last November, or the expansion of existing stations, which I believe we also discussed, and which includes the Duane Street station that you had mentioned earlier. And so for CB1, we had notified the board of 16 planned infill station extensions that would add approximately 200 new docks across the district. And so all of those station and infill actions have been completed over the last couple of months, with the exception of the plans that we had for Duane Street. This, initially had come up because there were open restaurant conflicts. We had already identified and selected this site to increase in capacity, as part of our infill plans. And so this was a site that my colleagues and I had talked a lot about. There were a couple of alternatives that were also presented to DOT for us to review. And we took a look at all of them. And so I know the first one was potentially, or I guess there were different options. So let me back up just a second. The first option would be to keep the station where it currently is in its existing configuration. And that, was a challenge for us because we were hoping to add capacity to this station. Another location that we were asked to look at was also relocating the station to the south side of Duane Park, where we would be able to expand and add capacity to the station there. And then another location was the Greenwich Street sidewalk, in which we also took a look, but unfortunately are not able to move forward with that site just at the moment. We were thinking that it would be a potential candidate for what we're calling our 3D bridging. There are a couple of those sites across the district where the station kind of sits on both the sidewalk and the adjacent roadbed. Right now, we're working through a number of those sites. I don't have the total number off the top of my head, but we're working through a pilot now. So there are a few pilot locations that were installed back in August. We're looking to further evaluate and keep those stations on the ground until summer or fall of this year. And, if that equipment seems to be fruitful and work, we could look at potentially relocating the Duane Street station onto the sidewalk of Greenwich Street. But for the time being, what we'd also like to do is further allow and give some opportunity for restaurants on Duane Street where the existing station sits to, further participate in outdoor dining. And I think that's just a wonderful, pleasant coincidence, because the Duane Park location would offer us the ability to add that infill capacity that we had initially planned. And that's all to say, and just want to say it explicitly, I didn't mean to ramble there for a bit, that we are looking to relocate the station to the south side of Duane Park for the time being, and see what adjustments could be made in the future. But we're looking forward to adding capacity to the station here. And I don't have the timeline of relocation just yet. I think it's the coming weeks, but Jennifer and I can double check and of course let the board know when we're looking forward to move that station.
Okay, thank you for that update. I'm a little disappointed that this was part of your presentation, and it seems that people on the committee might have known about it and didn't share that, having specifically asked about this. So Friends of Duane Park has been on record for a long time. I know, and I'm not going to go through all the history, but we're not in favor of relocating it to the south part of the park. The restaurants that you are trying to serve now have both closed. Madeline's is not encumbered, but the Hideaway and Tokyo Bay are already closed. So, I would ask the community board who said that there was not going to be any action on this until after open restaurants was completed, to postpone or ask you not to relocate the existing site until you've had a chance to evaluate that pilot project for the sidewalk relocation over to Greenwich. The other alternative, there were 4 or 5 other alternatives from Tribeca Ducks and others, and I'm sure I advocated for it also. There's also the cutout on Greenwich Street, which would allow even more capacity that doesn't include the sidewalk bridging. So even if the priority, prioritization of sidewalks is more important, you don't have to necessarily do the 3D bridging. You have a full cutout on Greenwich Street in 2 different locations in which to move and add capacity. The other thing is there's no sidewalk over there at the southern part. I mean, there are a lot of logistical problems with the southern part of Duane Street. There's no sidewalk access, right? There's no curb or no sidewalk between the landscaping and where you would propose to put that site, right? So that means that to get to the bike, people have to walk into the street roadbed to get to the bike dock. Okay, so there's no, and then anyway, what is the process now? Are you guys like with the other 4 sites? Are you in the process now of surveying the people that are involved? Because so far, I'm the representative of Friends of Duane Park. I would be your stakeholder. I'm pretty sure you haven't asked the people in front of 166 Duane or, other people who would be affected by that. So what is the process now for public engagement on this proposed relocation?
Sure, and Carrie, I do hear that the frustration and the disappointment. I know that you had come to us with some alternates to review, and we did take a look. So I will say that the Duane Park and the Greenwich Street sidewalk were to us the most feasible, and those were what I had, the talking points for in terms of our evaluation. I'll take another look at the previous alternates that you had mentioned as well, but what we did have to do here was kind of balance our need to add capacity to the district in this location, as well as figuring out, what could work. And I think there is some promise for 3D bridging. That's something that we'll also just have to wait on and see. But in terms of going back to process for any city bike station, whether it be on the sidewalk or the roadbed, we do notifications with our partner list to the directly adjacent property. So for here, we're working with the Parks Department to ensure there's no conflict with their operation. And we're also coming to the board tonight to share this update on the relocation. And so, we're going to see how this plays out. We're looking forward to adding the capacity, and, we can also chat offline and talk a little bit more about some of the concerns you raised too. And happy to, I don't know if there's space to talk about it now, if there's any specific concerns besides just having the station here adjacent to the park, what other, issues you'd like us to address or try to evaluate and kind of circle back to you on in the future.
Well, it might be, I mean, since I've been attending these meetings for the last 4 months to try and have a successful outcome for the stakeholders on the block, maybe it's better that you and I and Ralph Mussolino or, somebody at Parks Department get together. So, because we take care of the planted space, and I can't access the back of the planting area if you put bike docks along that street. The good thing about the placard parking people that I know some people on this committee are super up in arms about is that they're not there on the weekends when the volunteers go in to remove the trash, or when we have to get the leaf blowers out there to tend to the garden. So putting a bike dock there is basically going to be a giant, it's like if you put chicken wire on the fencing, right? It's going to attract every leaf, every piece of garbage. And, if you want to put a sidewalk there, that'd be awesome. Put the sidewalk there first, then put your bike dock there. Maybe that's a solution. But if you have no sidewalk and you're putting it right up abutting I don't know if you know that, but there are about 4 inches between the fence post and the end of the cobblestone, and that's it. There's no sidewalk. So your city duck would have like maybe 8 inches of clearance, or maybe 10 inches of clearance. I can't remember how deep that is from the front of the wheelbase dock to the edge of the thing. You don't have clearance there for people to go from the front of the bike, which means every time they're getting a bike, they're going to be in the middle of that Duane Street intersection. And unless you're also taking away the parking in front of 166 Duane, you're going to have curbside parking, a single lane, and people trying to back their bikes out into the intersection. And don't get me wrong, I'm a City Bike fan and user, and I want to add capacity. We've even done our own data analysis, and I know where people are coming from, most of our dock usage numbers. I have all that stuff because I was desperate for data. So I get what you're trying to do. I just don't think that's the right location. So I don't want to take, this committee has a lot of stuff to do, and I've already spent several hours on the YouTube channel trying to address this. So I don't want to delay everybody else. So maybe Lucienne, if you can put Jennifer and I directly in touch, or, it's just kparkerdavidson@gmail. So now everybody in the world has that. So just get in touch with me, and maybe you and Ralph and I can have a meeting.
Sure, yeah, and I think I also have your email in my contacts as well, so I will follow up, and then we can chat a little bit more about the concerns.
Okay, and can I get a commitment from you that you won't move forward on that until we've had that conversation? Is it possible to delay the bike share until you and I've had a chance to speak offline?
That is possible. I do just want to make sure I don't have the timeline of installation at the moment. I don't think it has been scheduled. So I think it is possible for us to hold off on making that adjustment just right now. And I do just want to speak a little bit more. There are going to be markings on the bike share station. I know you're very familiar with what the configuration looks like on the sidewalk in the street. We have dealt with other stations that are adjacent to green space that needs to be trimmed and maintained by the adjacent property, and we were able to make some accommodations there. And so I will try to loop in some of my bike share folks so that we can kind of talk through those operational concerns.
Right,
but I will be.
The measurements, I think, are not what unless they did the actual walking the block. I'm not sure that the measurements work, because we looked at that back when Suchi was doing this.
Okay, well, I want to thank you both for carrying this on in the future. I am going to ask that you take it offline so I can move on to Tammy Meltzer to speak. And thank you, Carrie, for bringing it and for following up.
Well, it's kind of funny because I had 2 questions about this particular location. So, and one Carrie should answer, and hopefully the other one Jennifer could answer. I'm curious as to the location around the park. The south side of that park is actually one of the few through streets we have across Lower Manhattan. Duane is one of the only through streets through Tribeca. So why look to narrow the through street versus putting it on the north side of the park, if that worked for obviously Friends of Duane Park in terms of their maintenance and everything? Why wasn't the north side chosen? Is the first question. And then secondarily, we're all very supportive of the expansion of City Bike, and I wonder whether or not you'd like to opine on the changes of 101 Barclay, which was presented to this community board last month, and included with that was their removal of a double bike station at the corner of West and Murray. And when asked about the City Bike, their answer to us was they were removing it to put in regular bike parking, regular bike racks. But I will say that there are a double set of bike racks on the next block in front of Whole Foods and the Bank of America that are widely unused. So I'm curious as to the DOT's position on the removal of a double station across the street from Goldman Sachs and in front of DC 37. So 2 questions.
Hi, Tammy. Good evening. For 101 Barclay, I don't have all of those details in front of me, so I wouldn't want to, speak without having all of the background. But that's something that Jen and I can look forward to touching base with on our colleagues. And so I will get some clarification on that relocation, as well as you mentioned an addition of additional city racks or other bike parking on the block in the stead of city bikes. Is that correct?
Yeah, they were very clear that it was not a relocation of the bike stations, it was a removal in their proposal. So they said they hadn't necessarily mentioned it to you, but I certainly, it's important. We heard from the community loud and clear that that's a large station that would like to be retained. So as long as we're talking expansion and numbers, figured I'd mention it.
So Jen and I can certainly follow up on that and circle back to you and Lucian and Betty with that update.
That'd be wonderful. And can you provide any clarity on the perspective of the north side versus the south side of the park?
Absolutely.
And of course,
yeah. And what was the second part, Kelly?
I'm not sure if Carrie wants to say anything.
Yeah, so Friends of Dwayne Park's position is that we worked long and hard in 2012 to come up with the location that we have. And it was a compromise position from the get-go. So Friends of Dwayne Park, Taste of Tribeca, there was a whole group of people who weighed in and said that we wanted to keep Dwayne Street an open space for historical reasons, for community purposes of gathering, etc. So that's why there are not bike assets on the north part of the park. And that's why there were not bike assets on the south side of the park. The idea was to leave Dwayne Street open. The station was supposed to be located on the Greenwich Street side. They dropped it on the Dwayne Street side, and we decided not to make it a big fight. So that's how the bike assets got on Dwayne Street in the first place. So that's why I don't want to take, so the residents at 165 aren't in favor, the residents at 166 aren't, it's complicated. And I understand that you're trying to add capacity. The data that I have, Waywiser Spatial, we retained them to get data because there wasn't data provided in the previous meetings. And there's not the need for capacity at the Dwayne Street dock now that you've added all the bikes that you have on Late and at various places, and assuming you're doing the 3D bridging pilot at 16 Hudson. So that's why I said I'm happy to work with Jennifer offline, but the history is, Tammy, and the answer to your question is we are not in favor of the north side either.
So thank you for telling me that. That's something I'm sure that Jennifer would want to hear. And for us, if there's a formal vote from the Friends of Dwayne Park that comes with a letter to the community board, certainly the community board can support that if the neighbors and everybody else around that, if you understand what I'm saying.
Sure, I'm happy to put it in a formal letter. I mean, I thought Tribeca docs and all the other publicly available information was enough, but I will write the letter.
I think some of that might, again, we don't work off of social media. So, it's got to come to me in a letter, sorry, or to Lucian or to Man One, something like that. With obviously a copy to Betty and Michael. And for Jennifer, I think one of the questions, I think that's the most important thing, because we have learned that DOT does notification, and appreciate that notification and engagement are not necessarily the same things. But if we are working with the community for public engagement and transparency, and you have the potential to push it back, obviously we would be looking for a commitment that it would not be put in the ground before, let's say, June, because if we're in February now and we hear from Carrie and the neighbors through the month of February, we would pass a resolution in March and send it to DOT. I understand that the timing may work for our benefit simply because you don't do a ton of install and change in the winter due to the climate. I mean, goodness gracious, not today and this week. but it would be making sure that there is time for the public process on the community side to happen. And what we would not want to see from this dialogue is to have something go in, something be moved before we're able to make what is the requirement of the community board, and that is to have the discussion and do the proper process for the agencies.
Sure. And so, I know we've been talking about this particular station for some months now. I can't myself make the commitment that we will hold off on installation until the summer. To clarify just one sticking point too, we do install city bike stations year round. We certainly wouldn't do any work right now with snow and ice on the ground. But our expansion and our infill practices are happening year round. And so we do see that even though ridership is down during the colder months, folks are still riding bike share throughout the whole year. But what I can do here, and I know Carrie and I are going to catch up offline, we can continue to talk a little bit more through the concerns that friends have for our plans for the south side of the street. And then going back to the north side of the street, I think the north side of the street, or the north side of the park rather, was the first alternate that was presented to DOT. And because of, it is a shorter space here, right? There's the crosswalk and then there's the fire hydrant at the corner. There isn't enough feasible space for us to relocate that. And then to relocate the station there. And then following that very initial evaluation, that's when we took a larger look at other sites across the block and around the corner. And so I don't want to take up too much more time, but that's just to clarify some of the points and technical points on the north side of the park. But we're happy to continue our discussions offline, and for the time being, hold off on making that station relocation. And so that's where I stand.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I would assume, Betty, and Lucian, I think, is the one who needs to key in here. We are not at a point yet of resolution on this until we hear from more of the neighbors. Is that correct? I mean, we know we don't want it in front of the restaurants because we've lost now 2 due to the...
That's correct. We don't have enough information. And in the past, people have come out in different directions. So we would need to go a lot broader.
Well, because we already know that we definitely don't want it over in front of what was the Hideaway and the Japanese restaurant, in order to be able to give the future operators an opportunity to thrive in the new environment. But the other thing to consider, when you talk to parks, Jennifer, this is a park in particular that does events for the local community for and with, that support not only the businesses, the park itself, but also several of the nursery schools and other community organizations. So it would be really important that you are able to work it with them to ensure that by adding a bike station, you're not limiting their ability to support the community in the variety of ways that they already do.
Absolutely. And we have hundreds of stations that are adjacent to parks. I know every site is unique and has its own context. But I will be able to ask parks, and Carrie can also share additional information if she has it about the programming, the operations, what else goes on adjacent to the park, so that we can work to accommodate the events day of. We do that elsewhere, and so we just look forward to catching up offline.
Thank you all. And those are all the questions that I have on this item. So I'm going to move back to item number 1. We'll go back to.
Great. Yeah, I'm just gonna exit out and get back to that.
Get to go
So it's
back
2
to-
slides back. And while I do this, I think Brittany was saying she was having a hard time getting access to the raise your hand. I think the app has changed a few times. So if you're on your phone, there's like 3 little dots. I think right next to like the mute and the video buttons. It's kind of hidden to raise your hand. But I'll of course always, if you can't figure it out, just chat Lucian and he'll loop us in.
Okay. And according to the agenda, we're going to do access and safety of pedestrian ramp users. Since I'm the one presenting and asking, I'm turning this over to Michael to actually run this item.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Betty. So I think immediately I'm going to go right back to you since you're doing the presentation, but I'm happy to look for discussion afterwards.
Great. You can start with the next one. This one is very targeted. As those of you who know me in person, I am a mobility device user. So I do have a soft spot in my heart for the places where we're not allowed to get on or off the sidewalks. But I do speak for all wheeled device users. And I specifically wanted to talk about T-intersection rules because they drive me crazy with how far I have to go out of the way to get on or off a sidewalk. And we're going to see some pictures. This is cogent to those, but if you go to the next slide. This is one of the traffic rules that I'm talking about. It's a T-intersection like you just saw before at the top, which happened to be Chambers Street, where North End Avenue in Battery Park City hit. But this is a general rule, and this is on the DOT website. Anyone can go to this. Exact copy. T-intersections allow some parking at T-intersections, those without traffic signals, always stop signs, or crosswalk markings, even if there's a curb cut at that location. So yes, where the green circles are, it is legal to block curb cuts in those locations. Those with the red X on them are considered illegal by the DOT and the rules. I can tell you, people in reality don't know the difference, so they just block all of them. Curb cuts are the sidewalk that's been lowered or cut down to facilitate access to the street. And there is a mechanism for getting some of the things changed in a particular site, but it's based on the distance from the nearest crosswalk, which I don't think having to go a block out of your way is exactly reasonable. Also pedestrian volumes. Some of these are in more residential areas and the volumes aren't like in the very commercial, but they still bother the same people over and over again. So I want to give you some examples what it looks like from the point of view of someone who needs them, because children can't show you. This is Battery Park City, and this is classic of anywhere that's near one of the rivers, which we in our district are surrounded on both east and west with rivers. But as you can see, almost every road is a T intersection at the end. If you look into where this little signature is on the east side of West Street, you'll see that for BNY Mellon, which we had a recent talk about in land use. But there you'll see that Park Place is another example of a T intersection. They are all through our district. Staples Street in Tribeca. I mean, they go on and on. I'm giving you an example where I can get you pictures. And so I'm going to talk about near Stuyvesant High School. You'll see it marked at the northern end, Battery Park City. And you'll notice across the street at North End, across Chambers Street, but also along North End Avenue, is Brookdale, which is a center, it's an assisted living center with a lot of elderly in wheelchairs. So this corner is of interest, not only to me who lives there, but to many. For the next slide. Just so you know what it looks like when you're at my height. So whether you're a wheelchair user, this is halfway up the sidewalk ramp. It's not at the top on the sidewalk. It's not down at street level where it gets worse. And you can see there are no crosswalks, which is common. The other side of North End Avenue doesn't even have curb cuts to cross Chambers Street. And the crosswalks, as you'll see at the next picture, could at least alert drivers. I have no sight line of anybody who's coming at me, and driver has no sight line of me sitting there because I'm too low compared to the parked cars. Even with a crosswalk, it doesn't clear up that problem, but there is some legislation out there. Legislators kind of like to deal with crosswalks. And so they are thinking about maybe having riders have to pause as they approach them, because so many people who are killed in New York City are done in crosswalks. So I know it's not the simple solution. And talking about sidewalks, you can see sanitation department doesn't bother to clear the curb ramps anyway. So I understand they're mostly unusable. But if you go to the next slide, here you can see this is from the north side of the street on Chambers looking towards South End Avenue, looking towards North End Avenue. And you can see we have some law enforcement people on the right-hand side who like to use their placards to block. And you can see he's been there for quite a while, hence the garbage collecting underneath him. I got to talking to the person in the Pepsi truck because there are a lot of deliveries in this area. And likewise, they can't use the curb cuts either. They have a little easier time jumping the curbs, but the strollers, the walkers, they have difficulty and can't really use this. You have to go block in either direction to cross the street or use the street, which is what most of us do instead. If you look to the left, this is a DOE placard. It's a teacher at Stuyvesant High School who I've spoken with, and he said, hey, I need to be close to my job and I'm in a hurry, so sorry. This is how much people think of blocking curb cuts. And as you can see, if you look on the left-hand side, look across the street, you'll see a little white car that's parked on North End Avenue. Yes, they park out onto the crosswalks. So when I talk about even a crosswalk doesn't protect, they shouldn't be allowed to block any portion of the curb cut because some people need the full width because of their hands on the sides of the wheels that they're pushing. Next slide. From the DOC website, it says pedestrian ramps are critical components in providing for a safe and accessible means of travel. So they recognize it. They just allow you to block it. Next one. We'll hear from the Borough President's office. When a ramp is missing, blocked, in disrepair, or improperly constructed, people with disabilities cannot fully participate in many activities and opportunities that other New Yorkers take for granted. I'm trying to get you to not take it for granted, but see it through our eyes. The next slide. Here it is from the city charter. City issued parking permit rules. If you look at them, many things are illegal if you have a permit. You'll notice things such as driveways, car share parking spaces. You will not see curb cuts on the list because it is legal to park in front of curb cuts. If you go to the next one, because we not only complain about placards, we complain about city vehicles as well. And no vehicles on behalf of the city can obstruct, and many things are listed. You'll notice curb cuts is not one of them. Crosswalks are. As I said, city government legislators seem to like crosswalks as if they assume all curb cuts have crosswalks. They don't, especially if there's a T intersection. So again, city vehicles are also allowed to park in front of T intersections, and I'll tell you they do. Next. There is, ironically, given all of that, and you were given a reading, for those who looked at it, in 2004 and again in 2016 as an extended, there were various resolutions, approvals made for various settlements, but in fact the latest was in 2019. In this case, the extension was United Spinal, who was the original complainant in these cases, and it's something I've been a member of for decades. The Center for Independent Living for the Disabled added the voice of those who are blind. And I did not want to forget them because they memorize locations so they know how to safely cross streets. When you block a curb cut that they're expecting to be a place where they can enter the curb, when you're blocking it so they go down the curb cut only to crash or trip into something, they're not happy about it either. It is incredibly unsafe. Go to the next slide. You'll see the terms of the settlement actually are quite extensive. The DOT did lose the lawsuit. It's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and hence you have been seeing changes. They have been trying to live up to the settlement. That's not my complaint. There's still things to do, and they're aware of that. We're interested in knowing specific locations to point those out. But all of this effort was put into something that we then can block with other laws. The next slide. So I am asking for a resolution that asks that we change the New York City traffic and parking rules so that blocking any portion of a curb cut or pedestrian ramp is illegal, including with city-issued placards or with city-owned vehicles. Further, that crosswalks be used in front of all curb cuts, because at least that is a warning to drivers that there is something there, even though they can't see the person. And number two, legislators seem to use this as a key to protecting pedestrians, not realizing, I'm sure, that they're excluding those of us who use curb cuts. So I turn it back to you. Thank everyone and turn it back to Michael.
Thanks, Betty. I'm looking at, ooh, I'm getting some feedback. Is it coming from you? Oh, okay. Sounds good. I see a hand up from Patrick. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Just really quickly, I see this issue around all the time, Betty. That was a great presentation. Thank you. Totally support it.
Thanks, Patrick. I saw Mark with his hand up, but now it's down. Mark, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just have a procedural question. How did this subject become an agenda item?
That's a fair question. I think, Betty, had we heard any complaints, or was this kind of our own initiative?
Actually, this has been a topic that came up in both the Battery Park City Committee. Sorry for interrupting.
No, go ahead, Tammy.
I'm taking chair prerogative to answer that, Mark. It's a subject that came up in Battery Park City Committee many times. It's been attempted to be addressed through Battery Park City Authority's ownership of the streets there and sidewalks, and at the end of the day could not be addressed through Battery Park City and had to come back to here.
Thanks, Tammy. And I do see Detta, you have your hand up if you want to go next.
Oh, thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you. So I'm very much in favor of this, not the changing the rules to not block curb cuts. Not block having it, and I also would support having a crosswalk at each curb cut. But having worked on previous road redesigns, I know that that's a very heavy lift. There was a street where I was participating in the redesign of it, and it's had a lot of T intersections, so they were unmarked, crosswalks. And the DOT does have a lot of parameters that they like to follow before they will put in a crosswalk. So. I would be in favor of it. I'm just throwing out the idea of possibly making this either two separate motions or, or just, yeah. So I'm just throwing that out. But even though I'm in favor of it, just because it might be more possible to get action on the changing the rules around not blocking the curb cuts. And it might be harder to get action around installing crosswalks at each curb cut.
Got it. Thanks, Detta. Betty, did you want to respond to any of that? Did you have any thoughts? Betty, you're on mute.
The DOT, the legislators, everyone involved can pick what they want to pick. So they don't really need to be separate with all the same whereases. But I take that as point. It's more likely one will be accepted than the other. It'll be interesting because I'd like to have United Spinal as well as New York for the Blind get copies to see what they think, because again, they are the ones who won these lawsuits.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Detta. Thanks, Betty. And Mark, I see your hand's still up. I'm not sure if it's a new one or.
Yeah, I kind of had the same feeling. I think before we vote on anything, we should have DOT and maybe some of the other stakeholders chime in on this before I'm not comfortable voting on the resolution because having a little bit of a transportation background, I had the same feeling about some of the setups. So I guess we have to call that heavy lift. Maybe it can be work around, maybe not. But I think we need a little more information on that and the other groups that were involved in advocating it before we do a resolution. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, that's a fair thought. I guess before we go ahead with any resolution, we could see if anyone else has any. Is there anyone else who feels that we should hold off on voting on a resolution on this? And if we think that we want to, we can always postpone. Or go ahead. I see Tammy with her hand up.
Pursuant to what Mark and Detta is saying, is there a path that we can make some progress that does not involve legislature issues, or to maybe divide a reso into two things, so you can approach city agencies directly one at a time with where we're going? Because I mean, this has been a topic that's come up in Battery Park City specifically a lot. We've had families come to us having troubles with the strollers trying to cross the streets. Obviously we've attempted to rectify some of the placard parking issues that we've had. That's actually over the course of the de Blasio administration gotten worse, not better. So I hear where everybody's going, but my question is going to be, is there any place to go before we have some of the other organizations come to divide the reso and attempt to make progress?
That's a good question. Ben, do you have any thoughts on that?
I was going to see if one of the Jennifers would like to speak from the DOT perspective.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, that would be great. I think Jennifer Leong and Jennifer Steinez are both still listed as panelists. So if either of you are listening in and able to unmute yourselves, that'd be great.
Hi, this is Jen Leong. The one thing I would say is that for the painted crosswalks in front of curb cuts, usually we paint crosswalks unless it's signalized. So that would definitely, as mentioned, it would be a harder way for us to do that. I mean, I know there are locations where we do have painted crosswalks without a signalized, without a traffic signal or any type of signage.
Got it. So, and I heard most of that, but just to clarify, it sounds like, so DOT doesn't, it's difficult to paint crosswalks if there's no signals or traffic signals or signage there. Was that, did I catch that, yeah. Jen? Got it. Yep. Okay, got it. So knowing that, Betty, what are your thoughts of updating this, tailoring this, or splitting this such that the crosswalk painting is a separate motion?
Well, that's kind of the other part of the question to Jennifer. Would it make any difference if they came in two resolutions versus one?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Would it be more favorable for this to appear as, because here are two different requests of the DOT, would it be more powerful if it was two different resolutions, each asking one of them?
Not really. We can't have a, I mean, I don't think I have a comment on that.
And just to add, I'll try also to add in my 2 cents here. I do think that whether it be one or multiple resolutions, it would be helpful just to understand explicitly what the board is asking for, which I think, we're seeing it here. And so any explicit request for evaluating or, additional thoughts on, I guess, changing the traffic and parking rules, that's something that we can respond to, whether it be for one or multiple resolutions. So maybe say, I defer to the board if they would like to prepare multiple resolutions. I wouldn't see it as more of a stronger case. And that's my take.
Got it. Thank you, guys. And so, sorry, Jennifer, to the last point, you said it would be helpful to make it known explicitly what we're asking for. Is from like a DOT perspective, is there more detail that you would be that would be helpful to add, or would something such as this be explicit enough from the boards?
Well, I know the board or the committee and the board have written, some thorough resolutions. So just seeing, I know we're only looking at the screen or this slide right here, but
Sure.
I wouldn't doubt that you would be able to include all of the background that Betty had presented throughout the last few slides. If there are any questions, we can, of course, look to answer what additional details you might have. But I don't think, I just meant to say your whereas and your therefore
Sure.
should be explicit, which they have been. So
Thank you.
Yes, no, I can answer that. The whereases as written in the draft give the details of exactly which transportation, New York City parking rules and traffic.
Which I can actually, I think we have I think we shared with everyone before the meeting, and I have it in. I can get this WebEx stuff out of
It
the
is.
way.
I took the slides from the draft.
Oh, great. Okay. Because I can show, I think one of the drafts. Is this the draft? This would be a draft.
Yes.
So yeah, so this is the therefore be it resolves, and we did add the whereases that were exactly tailored from, you guys all saw the text of that in Betty's presentation.
Could you make it just bigger? I'm somewhat on the blind side.
A quick note that there is a link to this document. If you go to live.mcb1.nyc, I provided links to the presentation. I provided links to this draft resolution. And if you open that link, you can see it being edited in real time from that link.
Yep. So anyone who's listening in can go to live.mcb1, and these are the links that Lucian just talked about. And I am looking at the draft reso right here. So that I think I cut someone off. Who was trying to speak?
I just wondered if you could make it bigger, but I think I can on my end.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can definitely make this bigger. And I see Data with her hand up, and then I also see Mark with his hand up. So I'll go to Data and then Mark.
Oh, yeah. The feedback from the DOT was very helpful. So given that we are presenting what the community board would like, and leaving it up to them, and that it's helpful for them to know what we would like what's our dream list. For that reason, I think I would leave both parts in the resolution, and I would be comfortable moving for a vote.
Great, thanks, Dada. And I see Mark, and then after Mark, I think I'm going to move. I see a hand up in the attendees. So Mark, I'll let you go.
Thanks. I just have 2 points. Again, I'm going to reiterate my point about these resolutions that are showing up instead of writing the resolution organically, which you always used to do. If someone's on the phone, they can't see it. Again, I object to this, and we're supposed to deal with this in the executive committee, and it hasn't happened yet. Second point, question for DOT. Jennifer, my understanding is that that the regulation, the street regulation, is always this signage, not curb painting. That curb painting is not how can I put it, legal, or in other words, you can't get a summons for parking at a curb that has that red paint on it, like say in Los Angeles or something like that. That only the signage is which takes precedent. Is anything changed in that regard?
Mark, that's correct, right? So all posted regulations are what are enforceable by NYPD.
Okay, only the signage, yeah. So any painting or anything is not enforceable for for any reason.
Right. It's
Okay.
we look at the right. You're supposed to look at the posted regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks. And So yeah, I know your concerns, Mark. I think as a way of trying to ameliorate them, we did provide a link on live.ncb1. And I do want to just explicitly say to anyone who's on the committee and anyone listening that this is a draft. Any of these whereases and therefore be it resolved can be changed if we decide to, but definitely hear those concerns. So with that, I'm going to go to, I see one hand up from the call-in user on the attendees. Lucian, would you be able to unmute that attendee?
Sure. I see them. Okay, you're unmuted, caller.
Hello, am I being heard?
Yes, you are.
Okay, this is the first time I ever called into a meeting because I spent 15 minutes trying to get in. I do Zoom meetings all the time. I don't know why WebEx didn't work. My name is Ellen Azorin, and I'm attending this on a phone, which is kind of frustrating because I'm interested in congestion pricing. Sorry. So I joined late. I can't see what's going on. I do see the resolution by some magic. So I don't know what is there somebody who could maybe text me why I can't get into this meeting?
Yeah, I think the easiest would be if you could provide an email, and maybe we can send you the information you need. But I will say thank you for joining, even with the difficulties. We're discussing a resolution on curb cuts, blocked curb cuts right now.
I see it.
Congestion pricing will be coming up. It's the item after the next, so you'll have to feel free to kind of drop. We'll be on it in like 30 minutes probably, or just hang out with us here. Yeah, if you could send an email to Lucian, would it be best to send an email to like Manhattan CB1 or?
You could just send an email right to me, LUREYNOLDS. That's LU Reynolds at CB, which is for community board, .nyc, .gov. LU Reynolds at cb.nyc.gov.
Got
Happy
it.
to send
I
you a link.
suspect I've already done all of that, but I will
The
do
link
that
is
in case I
on,
miss something.
Yeah, no problem. You just go ahead and send me an email, and I'll see if I can get you going.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Welcome.
And so with that, I don't see any other hands up. So what I'm going to do is ask, I'm going to try to take the temperature of the room. How many of members of the committee would like to postpone a vote on this?
I think I heard my
Yep. So I got one,
comments.
Mark. Is it anyone else? Give it like 5 seconds for people to unmute themselves. All right, I'm not hearing any other concerns. I think we're going to go ahead and call the question on this resolution. And if anyone has any problems with it, feel free to vote nay on it.
Can you do me a favor and make sure that it's clear? I know the whereas are history and you shared it in advance,
yes.
But I want to make sure that whatever comments we had here are accurately represented within the draft. So for example, if you would not mind adding in there, whereas DOT affirmed and what Jennifer said in the meeting, so it's representative on here.
Yeah, DOT confirmed.
You have to say when. So DOT confirmed at a CB1 meeting on February 2nd. DOT representatives, things like that.
Yeah, and the main ones that you were trying to capture were the discussion about that DOT does not typically paint crosswalks without signaling or signage. Was that the main one that you wanted in there, Tammy?
I think it was the second. This they don't provide crosswalks. I mean, it's a catch-22. Battery Park City has crosswalks without traffic control systems in place because they lead to a major park. So we have to represent what they said to understand the disconnect between what I don't want is the city coming back saying, fine, we'll just get rid of all the crosswalks because that will just screw us.
For sure. Cool. So we can make sure that we add that, and we can finesse this based on the audio from this. So we can go back in there, but we'll make sure that we have that. Any comments or questions about some of these whereases or therefore be it resolved before we move ahead with a vote?
Can we see the therefore be it resolved again? So
Yeah, let's throw that in there. So they are, again, for anyone who's listening, NCB1 implores the NYC DOT to change traffic rules and parking regulations so that blocking any portion of a curb cut, in quotes, pedestrian ramp, is illegal, including with a city-issued placard or by a city-owned vehicle. And second point, to paint crosswalks in front of every curb cut. So those are the things that we're asking and are therefore be it resolved.
can I make I would love it to say, therefore be it resolved to first as a separate to paint crosswalks in front of every curb cut, and then a further be it resolved so they are separated out, because we want them to paint crosswalks, period, at every curb cut. And then secondarily to change the rules and regs. It's kind of a two-step process. I know it sounds pedantic, but at least it's very, very clear that we want both and one does not depend on the other. If we could make any progress on any part of this, it will be an incredible improvement for safety.
Got it. And so I'm trying to think of the best.
Please reverse them.
Exactly.
I can survive without the curb. No, I can survive without the curb cut, without the crosswalk. I need to be able to get on and off the curb cut.
Sure.
I need that, which is why I put it as number 1, not number 2.
Right, so the be it further resolved would be to paint crosswalks at each curb cut.
Right.
Right.
Gotcha. Wait, so I may be misunderstanding. Are we thinking of cutting this up into 2? Is that the point?
Correct. That's
Okay, I'm apologizing, being dense.
Not
So
two
be it
motions,
resolved
just
to
be it
paint.
resolved.
Right.
There.
You know, we talked in committee about doing it as 2 resos, but it's not 2 resos, it's 1 resolution, but it can be 2, therefore be it resolves, because it's 2 action steps. I would take implores to demands. It's not like, it's just
Fine with that.
period.
Great. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Does anyone have any other thoughts or questions, concerns about these resolves? If not, I have not done this procedurally before. I think I can call the question and ask for a second.
Second.
Thank you, Tammy. All right, so I think we'll take this as if anyone.
I think technically it has to be a committee member. I might be wrong about that. For second.
Fine, I'll
Mark.
second. I'll second.
Yeah. Just procedurally.
Mark, I am considered a member of every committee when I attend for votes. That's a beautiful thing about the chair.
But yeah, I'm not 100% sure about that. We should just double check it just so there's no confusion in the future.
Great. Thanks, Mark. And thanks, Tammy. And thanks, Patrick, for jumping in there. So I'm going to go ahead and take the negatives first. Do we have any nays? If you do, just take yourself off mute and give your name.
I'm abstaining.
Okay, you're abstaining. All right. And so I don't hear any nays. Abstentions, 1 for Mark. Any other abstentions? Not hearing any others. Any recusals? All right. Then I think we've got our votes. Lucian, you were able to get that?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Perfecto. All right. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Betty, for that. And with that item over, I think I'm going to turn it back to you to continue running the committee.
I will let you go to the screen because I know actually you're next anyway.
Oh, I am. There we go. All right. So let me give myself a quick check. It's 7:30. I'm going to try to not let this run past 8. and I'm going to try to keep it shorter if possible. So I'm going to remind everybody who hasn't been in the committee, I guess, attending meetings for the past few months. We've been having a few ongoing discussions about trying to determine our CB1 street use priorities. As I like to say, I think before every time we discuss this, we've seen a lot of changes with our streetscape over the past 12 months, a lot of changes to the city. And so we wanted to take a chance in the new year to try to identify what our priorities were as a community board for kind of envisioning the future for Community District 1 and streetscape particularly. So out of those discussions, I'm actually gonna, let me share this with everybody in the chat really quick. Oops, I'm sorry. Giving away our email addresses. I'll try not to do that next time. I think I can actually send this to everyone. The link to the document now. Great. So if anyone's looking in the chat on WebEx, you can get access to this document. And so the first thing in this document was the brainstorm. This came out of 2 committee meetings at the end of last year. And this was kind of just us throwing ideas out about what some priorities, what some items that frequently come to us. And out of those, we continued discussing a few of the initiatives that our officials and representatives have decided on. So these were a few of the initiatives in our city and state, one being Vision Zero, another being the City Council Streets Master Plan, another being sustainability, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the landmark Global Warming Climate Act that came out of our New York State Legislature last year. And we also discussed a few possible metrics. I'm not going into these in detail right now just because we've gone into them in past committee discussions, and I would encourage anyone who wants a review just to look at this document. And if anyone has questions, I'll let anyone ask questions once I finish this. So in our last meeting, what I tried to do in the meeting was pull out some of those items from the brainstorm and the legislative priorities and try to identify a few buckets to throw these priorities in. And so we did that to a good extent in the last meeting. But what became evident as I was reviewing this in, I guess, the few weeks afterwards is that they really seem to be 2 different types of buckets that we were coming up with. One was a very general, like a value, and examples of those are like comprehensive street safety. We just believe it seemed like it was coming out in our discussions that we, want a safe district, and that kind of came from stuff that we talked about, and also Vision Zero. Another one's like making sure that we're maintaining pedestrian right of way. And some other items seemed more to be identifying problems that we think are priorities, but aren't, they kind of fit into a bunch of these different values. And so having a few discussions with Betty, what we kind of landed on was, hey, some of these exist as general values that we can use to guide future discussions in our committee. But these problems really probably, rather than having like one big resolution that we're voting on, these problems would be better suited to individual agenda items in upcoming committee discussions. And so those include placard parking, which is a big one. We talked a lot about this. And so I've identified a few possible items of discussion in a future committee meeting. And after we discuss this in a committee meeting, then I think what we can do is come to a targeted resolution on the topic of placard parking. Another one is reducing the burden of freight and delivery. We spoke about this a lot. There were a few items here from, talking about placard parking, another overlap, talking about designated delivery times. So it would be helpful to have a speaker or just more a broad discussion on these items, and then possibly, if we're aligned as a committee, have a vote on a resolution. So I'll walk through the problems that made sense to me as future agenda items. Then I'll go through some of those those values, and then I'm going to open it up to community members to see what you guys think. So another problem that was brought up was construction. And what the goal seemed to be out of that was identifying better ways of managing construction permits to make sure that we're promoting efficient use of the roadbed and reducing the impacts, the health impacts of polluting vehicles near residences and other buildings. So another item was security zones. We have a lot of security zones in Community District 1. It's come up a little bit in other discussions because they're kind of a black box for like, why can't we, open up this street for vehicular or pedestrian access? So that's a good possible future agenda item for us to talk about, because then I think the first step in that would just be understanding more about these security zones, establishing dialogue between CB1 and NYPD. Another one is pedestrian curb drop-off and pickup locations. We talked a little bit about this last month when we were talking about that loading zone in front of that building in Battery Park. I can't remember the exact location address, but we also talked a little bit about the neighborhood loading zone pilot program, and we seemed interested in learning more about that. So I think that's an opportunity for a future agenda item where we give a presentation, get a presentation on this topic, and decide if that's something that we'd like to advocate for coming into our district. So those were a few of the items that made sense to me as future agenda items. Now let's go back to the values. So I think what I came up with out of our brainstorms were 4 different values. One was street safety, which is kind of us advocating for, or I think the concern to make sure that our streets are safe. Pedestrian priority could be that's just the term I came up with, but we could also just say, it's maintaining pedestrian right of way. It ties in very well to Betty's presentation on access to curb cuts, access to crosswalks and sightlines of intersections. Within each of these, I think for pedestrian priority, just because these came up in our discussion, I listed a few possible topics for future committee discussions. But what I really want to get into is for each of these values, I also listed relevant metrics that came up in our discussions. And I think these are enlightening because where I see these values being helpful to us as a committee is as a guide that our committee can reference, such that any project, any agency that comes before us, we can ask questions about these metrics or questions. And this is definitely not an exhaustive list. I think this is going to be how I envision this as a document, a living document that we're going in and editing and saying, hey, this is going to be helpful to our committee members because this will help us know which questions to ask and how to be, I guess, consistent in the way that we're asking questions depending on what projects and topics are coming before us. And I'm going to look at my watch just as a time check. So another possible value that seemed to come up was sustainability. This linked in with the CLCPA and some discussions we had about pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. I jotted down a few of those metrics that we had talked about. Again, these are possible metrics that we could use if a project comes before us. We know sustainability touches everything now, especially transportation. These are examples of metrics that we could ask about when a project comes to us. How does this impact transportation boardings? We've had discussions about restaurants and large scale venues, and I think these are actually relevant to those, even though those don't come before our committee. So the last bucket is the squishiest for me, and I think that's because we're trying to fit a lot in that, and I think that's why it kind of lives as a value. But I would welcome any thoughts on this. But it's kind of maximizing public benefit. And it's the idea that we're all aware that there's a finite amount of space in the city. And for any space to be designated for like a single use is really a waste. So we really want to try to find a way, or it seemed like we wanted to find ways as a committee to make sure that whatever space is being used in our district or street space, whether it's roadbed, curbside, or sidewalk, we want to make sure that we're maximizing the benefit, that we're maximizing the number of users that can use it. We're encouraging blended usage, such that a parking spot or a curbside space isn't just designated to X municipal agency. That we're really trying to make sure that we're getting the most out of our public space. And so out of that, I also, again, this one's a little squishy, came up with a few topics for future committee discussions that might lead to resolutions. we talked a lot about reviewing existing street regulations. You know, some streets have, I think this actually came from Mark, like some streets have confusing and antiquated parking rules. And we should have an agenda item in the future meeting where we talk about those and come to a resolution. Also advocating for just more flexible regulations. We could possibly have a committee item on open streets. I know that the licensing committee is already working on that, or working on this topic, so it might not need to be addressed in ours, or maybe we'll work in conjunction with them. So I'm going to pause there. I know that I just went through a lot. Does anyone have any thoughts about these, values and future agenda items? I think I found the conversations we had over the past few months really helpful, because I think it'll drive what our focus is as a committee over the next few months than this year. So I'll pause. I see Mark with his hand up, but Betty, feel free to also take questions. So go ahead, Mark, if you're able to.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, with regards to the, I guess you know what topic I'm going to be talking about.
Yeah.
Curbside parking issues.
Yeah.
That's been a topic we want to talk about for a while. I mentioned the reminder, the committee voted to have that as an agenda item. We haven't done it yet. And then with regards to basically bringing in streets that we know that are, like I said, we start off obvious streets that need to be changed. The curbside regulations need to be changed. A couple of no-brainers, and just get the ball rolling on that. Not to do it as a comprehensive way. Like if you see the CB2 agenda every month, I mentioned they have a change. This no parking 8 to 6 to truck parking or whatever. So change the truck parking to alternate side parking, and between this and this, that's the way it has. That's the way it has to be done. Chipped away little by little, as opposed to this big comprehensive thing. And that could be like almost like a state agenda item every month or every other month, kind of thing, to get these things fixed. But we got to start somewhere, and I can pick some of these no-brainer streets in each little district. Someone, I'm sure, one person from each district will know a street that is ridiculous parking regulations that are so antiquated they don't make any sense, and we can just start from there. That'll be non-controversial. So we got to get the ball rolling, get this on the agenda, like you said. Thank you.
Agreed. Yeah, no, great points, Mark. And also, I think similar to what we're doing for placard parking, one of the discussions we had last month was, hey, are there any specific issues that we'd like to target for, if there were some, DOT effort or pilot program, like where would we ask them to prioritize? And we kind of put together a few streets. So it's easier, I think, as we said, to think of streets. It's easy to think of. I think all the streets in our district could be targeted, but I did throw a bunch of those into a Google sheet. And so I think we could start doing the same thing for parking regulations as we see them. So and I think you had a few streets that you were already thinking of. So if you could send me those, I can start a Google sheet with that information on it.
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, one obvious one, West Street between Hubert and Northmore. It's no parking anytime. There's no reason for that. It just makes no sense. It could be utilized for several things, alternate, some truck, that kind of thing. Just simple things like that.
Cool, right? And I'll add this into a different sheet. But I just am noting that for now. I see Mitch with his hand up as well. Are you there, Mitch?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear my name.
No, you're good.
Yes, Michael. Could you put up back where you had all the placard parking things? I wanted to make
sure.
So there was one where you said you encourage no placard parking by the loading zones, like those few things. Not on this.
Oh, not on this. Oh, I see.
So we're running it before.
Parking. This one right here.
I'm waiting. It was not on this thing. Yes.
Was it this, Mitch?
Something like that, where make placard parking illegal in truck commercial loading zones. Okay, great, but why stop there? Kind of like almost like the same remember when Mark was talking about, like, for the movies, people to just use spots that regular people can't park at, so it's a win-win situation. So, like, I would include metered. There's only a few metered parking where certain people can, you know, park for a couple of hours. Why not add the other places where people can park legally, whether it's to shop or to visit somebody, because the placard could really, they can park in all the other illegal spots. So I would add some of these other legal spots also, instead of just besides the truck and commercial loading zones.
Gotcha. So you're looking at this. It's kind of like the idea would be like adding meters.
Like, yeah, well, instead and make placard parking illegal in truck/commercial loading zones, comma, legal metered parking. You know, for you know, basically like a win-win situation. They can, like, if it's no standing, no parking, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., nobody else can park there. So let them take that. But places where
and I think that can be, yeah, and I think that's a really good point, and that'll be part of we're going to actually, I think, schedule each of these as a separate agenda item, so we can have a full conversation.
So at least adding that. The other thing I wanted to ask about, I really like we, you know, the blended the blended rules thing, where like some streets get for multiple uses, and I just happened to come across a situation the other night that made me think about this blended thing, like how it could work even better. I know that I had to borrow a family's car. I don't have a car, but I had to borrow it to do some family errands the other night. And when the trains, you know, don't work after 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was coming back like from the Bronx later than that. So I just had to take a car and drive myself down and then bring it back the next morning. And on Duane Street, between Hudson and West Broadway, there was a couple of restaurants, and it was like on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So they had the streets closed. Okay, but the restaurants are on the north side of Duane Street. So they had like the structures, and, you know, fine. But on the south side of Duane Street, the whole street is empty. It's cold, like it's, you know, it's actually raining. There's no people, like, you know, like at 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. And there could have been those like 7 or 8 spots that would normally be legal at that time could be used with no dangerousness to anybody else. So they're closing off the whole square block instead of just like the side where the restaurants are. This doesn't impact any bicyclists. It doesn't impact the safety of any pedestrians. It's just like without thinking, you know, closing all 4 quadrants.
Sure. So yeah, I think that probably would fit into a discussion about open streets, seeing how that's impacting parking. So I think that's
Right, but it's not like, I don't want it to, it shouldn't be like one side pitted against the other.
Sure.
There are some streets where there's restaurants on both sides, but where there's like a small cafe or restaurant on one side and the other side is completely empty. And, you know, it's just also common courtesy. If a car has to like come out and back out, it goes 1 mile an hour, somebody moves the little gate or whatever, you know, the thing. It's something that should be is easy to do and not hurt anybody.
Sure. No, that's a good point. Thanks.
I think he's right about that one. I'll agree. He's right.
Thanks, guys. And I see Mariama also has her hand up.
Yeah, I agree with both Mark and Mitch. And I would ask, if not now, then maybe in the near future, we could also add Maiden Lane to that list that Mark was describing, places where, you know, you should be able to park. Their parking meter rules go up to like 10, 11 p.m. at night between Water and Cliff. So it's a good like 2 blocks of parking spaces that you can't use. I mean, I don't need them, but I just, when I walk by, it pisses me off because, you know, people could be parked there, you know, area residents, and they're not able to, or they have to pay, you know, until, like I said, like 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Noted. Yeah, thanks, Mariama. And let's see, do I see anyone else with their hands up? I don't see anyone else with their hands up. So if anyone, sorry, go ahead. Is that someone?
I can't find the button to put my hand up. Can you?
Oh, go ahead.
Can you check on Greenwich Street between, it's between, well, say Cedar and Vector.
Greenwich Street between Cedar and Verret.
About parking, yeah, because I mean, there's very little parking in my part of town, and there are signs everywhere. So could you just, you know, when the conversation actually starts, can you just check and see why there isn't any parking there? The police are always towing away cars.
Got it. All right, thanks, Pat. No, you're good. Thank you. Great. So I think what we'll do is, I mean, we'll keep these running lists, and I'll try to add them to the transportation shared folder, and we can continue adding them. So just to close on this, what I'm going to do is, I've been using the same Google Doc for the past few discussions. I'm going to take out the values and try to, you know, organize it and add references and build out some of these possible questions or related questions that we can be asking about these. Again, I think as we can have regular check-ins and maybe just organically, you know, update and change these values that we have. And again, you know, it's great to get everyone's feedback on what topics we should be having in upcoming meetings. I see Tammy with her hand
a
up.
hand in the attendee section as well.
Oh, great. I see that too. Carrie's got, okay, cool. So I'll go to Tammy and then I'll go to Carrie in the attendee list.
I'm happy to go last. Go to Carrie first, please.
Okay, sure. All right, we'll go to Carrie. So if you could unmute her, Lucian.
Thank you. I just wanted to commend you for this discussion. I know I've expressed it privately, but I just think it just says so much about this group and your willingness to really try and balance the needs of, you know, or trying to even understand and define the maximizing public benefit and what that means for all of us. I think that's a really important conversation. And I really applaud the attempt to try and put metrics around the discussions, because I think it'll not only help community members understand what the considerations are that are being balanced, but I think it'll also help DOT come with the right information so that we can have an informed discussion and have clear expectations about what the parameters of those discussions should be. So I really look forward to it. One question I have is in last month's presentation, which thank you for putting that on YouTube, was a discussion about the benefits of going block by block. I think Mark had brought that up versus doing a comprehensive look at things. Have you guys, are these values and things going to be done on a block by block, or is that still up in the air?
Yeah, we haven't had a discussion about that, but I will say thank you, Carrie, and thank you for joining for these conversations. It's been really valuable to get your insights on this stuff as well. We haven't had this, I guess these values have mostly lived, or in my mind, as a more comprehensive vision. And then my thinking is that this will be a template for us as a committee. Each time a project or an agency comes before us, we can look at this list and kind of look at these metrics and possible questions that are related to them and make sure that we're tracking according to these values. But I think there might be value as well as we're going through some of these different streets for, you know, antiquated regulations and placard parking to look at this on block by block level as well. But I'll also let Betty chime in if you have any thoughts, Betty.
Yes, I am personally not for a block by block, and I think this was brought up by, I think Mitch might have brought it up before. Kind of take on problems as they're identified by somebody as a real problem rather than look, we have so many issues to deal with that and do not have the manpower to go out and search out looking for things. I doubt the DOT is looking for us to remake the whole district in sweeps. So I agree with taking on problems as they're identified versus trying to make any attempt to identify for a problem for a whole district.
Oh, I'm sorry. What I meant from the block by block is just, let's say you're dealing with placard parking. Mm-hmm. Will you then look at the placard parking problem? Like we have that list that's now being generated. So let's say, I know Duane Park is on like every list right now, so I'm not going to mention that one. But let's say it's Trimble Place, right? So are you going to look at Trimble and the area around it in dealing with that? Or are you just going to do with that particular block? You know, do we deal with the open streets aspect of Duane Street near Keough as a one block? Or do we look at Duane Street between Greenwich and Broadway? Like, you know, like how, what area? I don't know if there's a one size fits all. I'm just trying to get a sense of, you know, if we're going to deal with Duane Street or we're going to deal with Trimble Place, do we circle around the adjacent blocks to evaluate what all of the commercial loading, placard, pavement meters, you know, like how is all of that going to be?
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I don't have that kind of expertise, and I don't have the size of backing that the Department of Transportation does. I think we take on, and the blocks can be differ by what they're complaining about. Which sign is up there for which population, those sorts of things. So it has to be done on a much more one-off basis. Of course, knowing when you create a problem, particular sort of signage, you're gonna have other neighborhoods come forward with similar kinds of situations in theirs, which will, of course, raise other issues. But the DOT is really looking for specifics. They're not looking for sweeping problems. In general, they're very localized problems with specific solutions. Or not.
Thanks, Betty. All right, so I do see some more hands up. I am just going to note I was trying to stay within a half hour, and so that would make us at 8. So if we can get to the next few questions, comments, and wrap up by 8, I think that'd be great. So I will go to Tammy. Did you still want to wait? I could go to Mitch, Mark, and then you.
Either way, whatever works for the committee. I'm flex.
Yeah. Tammy. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think, you know, part and parcel to our former chair's analogy, we're kind of like a jelly donut. So if you push on one side, you know, it's going to come out the other. So it also goes into things I've always said, that we do need to take a holistic look at it, but DOT has told us they make change on a block by block basis. So it is about understanding the granular and the surrounding neighborhoods, but, you know, much to like what Betty says, we respond to constituent and community concerns and complaints depending on what they are from each individual. With that knowledge, we do still need to have a further discussion based on what Corey Johnson is saying and the governor are saying as we come through 2021 about congestion pricing and some of the issues that we have. I don't want to get stuck in not opining on the specifics of how it affects CB1. And there are pros and cons to everything, and we don't have to agree with everyone, but we do need to stand for the community that we represent. So it's super important to me that we not get lost in this without having and get basically lost by not opining before the winter is over or spring. And then we have there's nothing on record, so there's nothing to say. There's been a lot of dialogue, and I really do, some of this can hold in the long-term goal. I mean, I think you've all heard me say if I had it my way, all agency parking would be wiped away, and they'd have to reapply bit by bit as a way to try and truly get a hold of what's going on with agency cars and parking and placards. But that in itself, if that happened, well, heck, that would be a really interesting look at congestion pricing once all of that was gone. So we need to start doing sort of resolutions along the way for asks. And if there are general ones, then I think we should take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get lost in working so hard that we don't say anything. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tammy. Those are great points. I see next, all right, so I'll go to Mitch and then Mark, and I think we're going to close this topic after that. So.
Okay, I just want to, Betty, I think maybe I miscommunicated or maybe you misheard me. In the past, I've just given some specific examples on certain areas, but I don't think that I ever suggested, even though I'm not against it, but I don't think I ever suggested a block by block thing. I was just giving specific examples, but I do agree with the holistic approach that Tammy had just mentioned.
Got it. Thanks, Mitch.
Okay.
All right, Mark, you get the final word.
All right. Like I said earlier, and I showed the examples last month. We should do this exactly like how Community Board 2 does it. They've been doing it for years that way. We just identified 3 streets. Mitch mentioned one, I mentioned one, Mary Ammer mentioned one. Mentioned one. Parking meters goes to 10 o'clock. It's ridiculous. But but that being said, there's no reason why those 3 items cannot be on the agenda next month for discussion and resolution to be fixed. We keep talking about it, and it just keeps getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and it never gets done. And it never gets on the agenda, even though, like I said, the committee last year voted to have these type of subjects on the agenda. So until we start doing it, it's never going to get done. And there's no reason why we can't have it next month. Why not have those 3 items put on the agenda next month? I see no reason why not.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Mark. So
does anyone in the committee disagree with that?
I think that goes directly to what I was saying. Taking chunks bit by bit, passing resolutions month by month.
All right, so then put them on the agenda. The committee agrees. We can give you this. Each 3 of us can give you the specifics for the wording, but let's get the ball rolling so we can get these districts fixed.
Yeah,
it'd be good to get neighbors to come for the streets. You know what I mean? To have representation and feedback from the community.
The manpower could be too. Is that myself, Mitch, and Mariama can probably just put up a few signs in that area that this is going to come up next month, so they're aware of it. I'm willing to do that. I have no problem doing it.
It would be good as well if you could get, condo associations or building managers to send official opining as to, kind of go with.
Yeah, no problem. I'll put notices. No problem.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, I'll turn it back to you, Betty.
Thank you. Then I guess we'll go on to the next topic, which.
Oh, let me pull that up. Where are slides? There they are. There we go.
Great. And as I said, this is really just a preparation for restarting next month. Why? A couple of reasons. I want people to really get back online with what is in the law and what it is that they want to bring forward. Tonight is more a listening session for me to start getting some input on things that especially are of concern to people. Go to the next slide. I wanted to do a couple of quick reminders. Starting date has not been announced. We still need to do federal government approval, which is interesting. It looks like Pete Buttigieg will probably be a Senate approval and probably get it in a fairly near future. Then a decision about what environmental assessment, which has been the holdup for the last year or so. Hardware installation would need to be done after that clearance comes about. And the appointment of a traffic review mobility board, which in fact we as CB1 has already written a resolution asking the governor and mayor to start appointing those members, but they have yet to be appointed. Note that it can be as late as just 30 days before tolling is implemented, before we find out anyway. Next slide. I want to remind people the congestion pricing does have reasons. The decrease in traffic congestion with the increase of speed of traffic, of which we would be among the primary recipients since we are the part of the congestion zone. That it would create a stream of funding for the MTA, would fund $15 billion of capital program from the MTA is talking about 2020 to 2024 when they give numbers. The revenues from congestion pricing are a critical part of the MTA funding. The reduction in air and noise pollution related to the traffic is important. And I want you to think seriously, because we're going to need to address what this means to equity, what this means to improved health in the congestion zone. because we know that the air pollution coming from vehicles is the cause of Alzheimer's. It is a part of the link to stroke. It is a part of the link of heart disease and heart attacks. And unfortunately, we got this data, a lot of it confirmed by COVID, which is a very sad way of being able to do the research. But unfortunately, or fortunately, at least people took advantage of that data to demonstrate what happened when traffic declined. So did the heart attacks. Go down to the next. So what's in the law? Because again, we're really dealing with a law that's been passed. It was passed in 2019 as part of the budget for the state of New York. And unfortunately, the MTA has already initiated the issuing of the $54.5 billion worth of bonds for mass transit improvements. Unfortunately, in 2020, this money was used for operating expenses because of the problems during the pandemic. So we are still completely in the hole, making no payments towards improving capital improvements. $15 billion needed includes MTA funding from internet sales, which will generate $5 billion behind from last year's revenue. A new mansion tax, also behind from last year because of fewer transactions. And that leaves only $5 billion, or $1 billion a year plus expenses that must be generated by the congestion pricing itself. Those funds, again, are for New York City Transit, but also the Long Island Railroad and the Metro North. So I want you to remember the large constituency out there that's paying and expecting some money from it. And that needs to be kept in mind when we're opining. Next. Because the legislators care about that. Remember, we have a working group, and that's why there's some people here who are not members of transportation, and some transportation committee members who aren't on it may choose to leave. They will be responsible for drafting a resolution. So that's what we're working on, is getting that information together. The resolution will be presented and voted on by the Transportation and Street Activity Permit Committee, because a working group cannot pass resolutions. So the people in transportation, yes, you will have a say whether you participate or not on the working group. Tonight, we're going to restart the process with preliminary ideas on what topics should be discussed and eventually covered in a resolution. As I said, this is more for me. If I ask questions of people speaking, it is me getting clarification so that I can help me with my planning, not because I doubt what you're saying. Next slide, because I think this is the end. Oh, that there are exemptions. So for things we don't particularly have to worry about, and also I want you to see what the legislators were thinking about, what they consider exemptions, may not be what you're considering an exemption. The FDR Drive, West Street, and roadways to the Hugh L. Carey Tunnel are not included. So for those looking to go through and not go into the congestion zone, don't have to worry about those fees. Emergency vehicles or vehicles transporting people with disabilities are exempt. Because again, they don't have to pay it even if they're captured. Residents of the community of the congestion pricing district that make less than $60,000 a year are entitled to a tax credit for the tolls that they pay. They can take off on their taxes as long as they also do not declare them as a business expense first. So keep in mind, exemption to them means you can take it off on your taxes. Cars across 60th Street boundary to comply with alternate side of the street parking is a glitch that the MTA's chair said that he's going to figure it out. I haven't heard those details yet. We're not particularly worried about them, and because that's going to be worked on. And again, business expenses. So for those of you who claim you're doing it for your business, take it off on your taxes. That is the exemption that is somewhat anticipated at this point for that population as well. Additional exemptions will be offered by the yet unnamed Traffic Review Mobility Board. So we have no idea what they are. but I'm sure you've all heard on the news for the last year, the various unions and groups that have been asking for exemptions. And next. There has been a congestion surcharge that has been in effect for 2 years. The congestion zone for these fares actually extends way up to 96th Street. It's not the same as the traditional congestion business district for the other. But every time you take a shared trip in a taxi cab, you're paying $2.50. Every time you're taking a non-shared trip in an Uber, a Lyft, a black car, any of the green taxis, you're paying $750 a trip. For shared rides, which means you're traveling in what is known, everybody is a shared, it's 75 cents per person. So whether it's Uber or some other, it's their share ride plans. There are no surcharges for Access-a-Ride or other MTA dispatched trips. I want to remind people, this has been in effect for 2 years, and there are people who live in CB1 who have been and are and will continue to pay congestion pricing surcharges. Next. So I'd like to hear what people have to say about where to go. Please keep in mind those comments. And Mariama, you're going to go first. But I'm checking for other hands. Please speak, Mariama.
I just want to jog my memory. Is the panel that you referred to, what was it, the TRCTM?
Something
whatever.
like, yeah.
Whatever. Is that the one where we voted to specifically ask that there was a member specifically from downtown?
Yes. That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. So I'm glad to see that that's being formulated somehow. Hopefully we get that. Thanks.
Yes, no, that'll be good. As I said, we have already opined on that as a community board and have asked the people in the congestion zone with at least one from CB District 1 be included amongst that panel. We don't know yet.
Oh, let me say one more thing. The COVID, you mentioned some of the things that COVID has revealed. It's also revealed apparently that a lot of people don't actually file taxes. I don't know, to what extent that may or may not apply to CB1, but it was discovered by people not receiving their, in some cases, the people that didn't receive stimulus were because the government didn't really have records for them. So they fell into the economic eligibility, but they, weren't necessarily a person on paper, according to the government. So that could come up again if it's just based on salaries, particularly salaries, low income, low to middle income, may be among those people who don't have to file.
Okay, so you're saying people who don't file taxes, but are also low income?
Yes, since it referred specifically to deducting it from your taxes. If you don't have any, that would be problematic. And we can't presume that people in those income brackets don't drive. Most actually of the NYCHA housing projects come with parking lots for the residents. There are a lot of people do have cars.
Yes, thank you. We know that 7% use them for work. And I see, actually, Charles Komanoff.
Oh, could I offer just a quick correction? This is Detta. Because
Sure,
it's that the surcharge on the Uber Lyft is $275, right? And on taxis is $250. Because I think you said it was $750.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. What's written is $250 for non-shared trips on taxis, $275 for hire vehicles. I think I took it off their website.
Right.
So, but thank you for that correction. If I misspoke.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And Charles, did you want to speak? And then Mitch?
Yeah, hi.
And Tammy?
Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you. I'm not a committee member. I live on Duane Street. I work on Beaver Street near Hanover Square. And some of you probably know that I've been professionally involved in congestion pricing for a long time. In fact, in 2017 and 18, the governor's staff adopted my spreadsheet model, which is designed to spit out answers about how much revenue and how much faster traffic will go and how much air quality will improve, yada, yada. They use that to scope different versions of congestion pricing. And what I want to say is that it was a huge effort to enact the legislation 2 years ago that authorized the startup of congestion pricing, which in fact was supposed to have happened right now, except for the 1-2 punch of COVID and the Trump administration holding anything that might work to the benefit of New York City, holding hostage for political reasons. And one of those factors is now gone. Hopefully the other will be gone as well. But it was an effort that involved a really diverse and vibrant galaxy of people and organizations. Every transit and livable streets and street safety advocacy group, from Regional Plan Association and the Riders Alliance to the Strap Hangers Campaign and Transportation Alternatives and many others, they didn't just check a box. They went up to Albany and lobbied. Even Families for Safe Streets, an organization of survivors of traffic violence, people who've lost children or parents or other loved ones in car crashes in New York City, they were up in Albany lobbying the state Senate and Assembly to pass the authorizing legislation, because they understand that congestion pricing, it won't eliminate all car trips. That's not what it's supposed to do. In fact, it's only supposed to eliminate 15, at most 20%, because we want the other 80% or so of trips to remain as a revenue source, as a cash cow for public transit, as Betty explained. But the coalition also included groups like the Community Service Society, the oldest anti-poverty organization in the United States, which documented in a report in 2017, that was a key part of bringing the governor on board, that for every one person of low income who is going to be driving, or who now drives into or out of the congestion zone daily and who will be subject to the charge, there are 38 low income New Yorkers who don't do that, but who take public transit and will benefit. And so what I would like CB1 to do, starting with the Transportation Committee, is to issue a ringing endorsement of congestion pricing and to urge the governor to get back on track, the MTA to finalize whatever environmental impact work they're required to do, to pressure our new president and our new transportation secretary, who was confirmed today, to issue the guidelines of how this is all going to be done, and to put it in place as soon as possible. And I guess I want to conclude with a kind of friendly warning that any complaining, any special pleading, any seeking of carve-outs for exemptions for residents of our part of Manhattan, the part that will benefit the most, as Betty pointed out, not just because we will experience the greatest reductions in traffic volumes, but also because we are the best served by public transportation, which will get a big shot in the arm due to the revenues. And so any complaining that we do is going to reverberate around the city. And other areas that I believe also stand to benefit from congestion pricing, but not quite in as lopsided a way as us, are going to look at our objections and say, well, my goodness, if CB1, if Lower Manhattan doesn't like it, well, maybe that means we shouldn't like it as well, or we should seek our own carve-outs. And before long, the whole edifice of cooperation and sharing of the toll burden that is required for congestion pricing to be implemented and to finally start putting cash dollars into the MTA and taking cars off the streets, that is in risk of collapsing, and that would be a calamity. So let's do the right thing. Let's stop the special pleading. Let's stop just thinking about our own individual self-interest as car owners or drivers, and let's get behind a common purpose, a greater good, and make sure that Community Board 1 comes out swinging and singing for congestion pricing.
Thank you,
I thought it
Charles.
was already a law. We're not like trying to stop anything here, right? Like this is
Correct. We're talking carve-outs at this. He was talking about carve-outs at this particular moment. Because you're right. No, it is a law. And that's, I'm going to turn it over to Mitch next, and then Tammy, and then Mark.
Okay, Betty. Obviously, I mean, I couldn't disagree more with the previous speaker, but I think Marianne was talking about the tax credits or somebody, obviously besides the people that are low income, there's also like freelancers and so many other people where the tax credits mean nothing if they're not carved out. You know, it just doesn't help. There's so many other types of people that tax credits won't make a difference, and those are the people that are the most vulnerable. Number two, I have a question for you, Betty, that I was reading before. There was one spot where it said something must generate 5 billion between 2020 and 2024. And I remember, I forgot, I'm getting old. One of the other, she's not here today, one of the other members of the committee that was brought up when we were like meeting in person, you know, who like must, it's like one of those like, you know, going out of business sale, must, you know, sell everything, you know, like what happens if it's not generated, you know, you know, tolls must generate. Like that's to me is such fraudulent advertising. I mean,
no, Mitch, let me tell you why that, and then you may still feel that way.
Sure, Betty, thank you.
The premise of that 54.5 billion in bonds was based on money coming in via tolls. There were other sources as well, obviously. We're going to be $1 billion from tolls plus the cost of running the program. They were going to consider carve-outs or variable rates, anything. It had to come to $1 billion. So if you carve out more people, those remaining are going to have to pay more and more and more money.
Okay, I understand.
So the state law set that.
Okay, and then I was just, and like I said, just for anybody that doesn't know me, I'm not a car owner, but I think of many other people like New York is a city of 5 boroughs, not just Lower Manhattan. In today's Daily News, Chuck Schumer was saying that the MTA is there's going to be the stimulus package will probably include around 30 billion in relief for public transportation agencies, and the MTA is on track to get the biggest chunk of that, according to a source close to Schumer. The thing is, we definitely need help for the MTA. I'm a, pedestrian. I'm a 95% of my traveling is trains, planes, and automobiles. I mean, trains and planes and buses. 2 or 3% is automobiles when absolutely necessary. But, I don't think that's yours or mine. That's what the government is for. That's, it's like if all of a sudden the community board's budget was slashed by 90%, would it be right for Lucian to tell us, listen, we got to come up with like $50 each, you 50 members, to make up for the shortfall? There's some unethical stuff here. While I'm 1,000%, the stuff you said about, affecting Alzheimer's and all that other stuff, I couldn't be more on board with you with that. But I just feel that we're going about some of this stuff the wrong way. And I'm hoping that things do improve. And I will say this, the first thing that has to happen is for the public transportation to improve. Because I could tell you, it's like, there's no social distancing going on. Unfortunately, I have to take the trains all the time from the areas that I have to go. I'm not able to bike with things that I have to carry and places I have to go and the times I have to do it. And, during rush hours and stuff, if you want to just crowd more people in, it's disastrous. So I don't have the answer, but I'm hoping that people think independently and don't support this 100%, because as we know from the L train before, when it was the law, nothing is written in stone until it's already stone. You know, so I just, and that's coming from an unselfish point of view, because I'm not a car owner. Thank you, Betty.
Sure, thank you. And I see Mary Ellen James' hand up. I see the other people put their hands down.
Oh. Betty, there's one other point, a very short point that I forgot to mention, if it's possible. It's almost like an ironic thing, and I'm definitely for increased like travel, like less traffic and better speeds. But it's almost ironic that, you know, because of COVID, when there was no cars on the street, there was so many more deaths and accidents. Unfortunately, with cars and motorcycles, and pedestrians and bicyclists were the ones that suffered. So do I want to see increased traffic speeds? Of course, but then, you know, that was one of the things that the government was complaining about, because there was no cars on the street for the first 4 or 5 months of COVID. So I just thought that was an ironic point. Thank you, Betty.
Yeah, thanks. No, and you're right. Tammy and Mark, I still see Mark. Tammy, were you putting your hand down on purpose, or did you want to speak?
I apologize. I did want to speak, and I think Mariama and Mark, and then I'll go.
Sure. Mariama, Mark, then Tammy.
Thanks again. I just wanted to give my own warning. You know, I first of all, I agree 1,000% with Mitch, and I wanted to respond to the gentleman that spoke before him. I apologize for not recalling his name, but I think Charles. Okay, I think it is, you know, it's potentially divisive to forewarn, especially at this early juncture, people against seeking variances, waivers, voucher, whatever the case may be, with regard to this congestion pricing, because you don't know all the reasons why people may need or want them. You know, I do drive. I try my best to limit the driving, and I keep my car inside. So I try to do my fair share. But in any case, my mother lives in Harlem, but she worked at Deutsche Bank in 2011. And she developed, as a result, stage 4 colon cancer. February 2020, it had been removed, and she went into a temporary long-term care. I haven't seen my mother since last year, since February 2020, because they went on lockdown. But prior to that, I'd have to take her to doctor visits. So I live downtown in this zone, and all of the major hospitals, particularly the ones that specialize in cancer, are at 60th Street on York Avenue. So I have to drive uptown to pick up my mother in Harlem, drive down to the hospital, and then back to here. And I should pay this fee every time. Why? Because I live in a particular zip code. There's going to be a presumption. And I'm not alone, because when I found that I was doing it, a number of my peers and fellow residents and colleagues down here are taking care of their parents. And we all need those hospitals, joint and special surgery, and Sloan Kettering, Cornell Weill, they're all in this little pocket right above the 59th Street zone. So there's a lot of reasons. That's just one reason, but there's a lot of reasons why people may need some sort of waiver or voucher or desire one. I don't even know if I need one. I know I desire one, because I don't think it's fair that I should have to pay that for everybody, for the MTA or whomever, especially during this pandemic. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Although, let me give you a tip. I also cannot drive. I take Access-a-Ride. Your mother would probably qualify. You could take mass transit and meet her at the hospital. So just another option to consider. And I'm sorry for your problems.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
They are difficult. And Mark, you were next?
Yes. Yeah. When you're dealing with a sick parent, you don't want to deal with mass transit. And Mariama and Mitch make great points. And just to piggyback on what Mariama said is that I don't think it's appropriate that we should be warned, whoever that public member was, about stifling our free speech and coming up with ideas. That's why we're here. So it's something I don't like. People warning us not to engage in our debates. With that being said, these exemption scam taking off the taxes is ridiculous, and it is a scam. Anyone who's a resident, every resident, regardless of income, should be exempt. The burden should not be placed on residents to pick up the MTA's incompetent way they run that business. They're in the hole. They've always been in the hole. I mean, there's corruption there. Just giving them more money to waste, and the service never really seems to improve. So, like what Mitch said, it is unfair. It is not right. And now congestion pricing hurts small businesses as well, and it's just going to hurt the little guy. And way to go, Albany. Way to go, New York. One more nail in the coffin for New York City is congestion pricing. It is one of the most idiotic pieces of legislation ever passed in New York. And we should really be fighting to get it repealed. That's what CB1 should be doing. Because like Mitch and Tammy and many others have said, all it does is hurt the little person. And all it does is going to give money for the MTA to waste because they don't know what the hell they're doing over there. They just keep wasting it and wasting it. They get billions of dollars and they just keep wasting it. Now they're going to get, what, $34 billion in a COVID bill, which has nothing to do with COVID. So these are the things we should be focusing on, and the committee members' free speech should not ever be stifled by any one person. That's all I got.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing. Charles's comment was not to tell people not to speak. It was to be careful, considering what you're asking, that it's a house of cards that could fall apart. If you ask for enough exemptions, there is no such thing, and the benefits disappear and the negatives reappear.
Well, that's
it was not telling
problem.
people to not speak.
I mean, if the MTA can't run the business the way they want, that's not our problem. The burden should be on us, and no one should be telling us what to say and what carve-outs we should have. That's our business.
I understand. I'm just warning you that nobody said to not speak. That's all I'm saying.
That's not what I heard. I heard give us a ringing endorsement and not to ask for any carve-outs. That's what I heard. Anyone else hear anything different? To me, that's stifling speech.
No, it was someone saying that he was in support of it and people should be careful.
Why should I be careful about what I believe?
Well, and you are saying it. So
yeah, Mark and Betty, I understand you guys. I think we can.
You're telling the people with the opposite opinion to be quiet. It's the same thing. All I'm saying is
I didn't tell anyone to be quiet. I don't know what you're talking about. He did, and that should and as chair, you should be able to deal with those things when someone says that.
Well, sorry, I didn't hear it, and I'm hearing you say the same thing he did from the opposite direction. And both of you.
I am not saying the same thing. I did not tell anybody that they cannot talk.
Really quick, Mark, I hear.
Michael, I have to say this. I did not tell anyone not to talk. But Betty, stop putting words in my mouth. It's not a he said, she said. Don't put words in my mouth. I didn't say that.
All I'm saying is he didn't say what you accused him of either. So let's move on because we're getting nowhere with this. And Mimi Vendetta.
Sure. Hey, I gotta say I agree with Mark in part. Overall, like I don't think that we're not here to make sure that Charles's Excel spreadsheet turns out to be accurate. We're here to, figure out what's the best for our community. And I find it offensive to have it be suggested that if we were to discover carve-outs, that it could potentially like prove this guy's potential theory wrong. So yeah, I just wanted to say that because it's just vexing. So I agree with everybody that spoke before me, except for that guy.
Okay, well, let me hear from Detta, and then I have a question to ask.
Yeah, I heard it differently. I heard Charles Komanoff speaking as a member of the public, offering his own opinion, kicking off debate. I followed congestion pricing from the early iterations of it. It was going on for well over a decade. All the previous versions didn't get across the finish line. I very much appreciated hearing what it took legislatively and support-wise to get this version across the finish line. So I really appreciated being informed about that. And I appreciated just hearing a perspective about congestion pricing that shows the trade-offs and shows the benefits. And I think it's a conversation opener, not an attempt for anything other than that, to just bring greater awareness to us. Thank you.
Thank you. And it takes me back to, I'm looking to see, Tammy, you hand up new?
So I think what I'm gonna round this up with
Thank you.
is our job on Community Board 1 is to advocate for the constituency within Community Board 1. So there is a holistic view that we need to take, that we always have to think of, what we say and what we do and how it might affect others, which is why, again, hearing everybody's perspectives are great. We don't all have to agree. You don't have to get to consensus. You have to get to majority vote. That's really all we have to do. So I am delighted to hear everybody's opinions in here, and everybody should and does have the right to speak. Some people have their own conflicts of interest if they work in the transportation industry, if they are paid by the city for transportation stuff, or if their company is one of those. Everyone comes with their own perspective. Small business owners have spoken up and hopefully will continue to speak up in this forum. All of us who either drive a car, ride a bike, ride a motorcycle, walk, whatever the case may be, CB1 has an interesting perspective. We do not have equity when it comes to the medical community down here. Having been someone much like Mariama and much like others, I had two parents living downtown who I transported because they couldn't afford to pay a cab every day to go up and back to Sloan Kettering for 5 years. So they couldn't take public transportation because if anybody's had chemo or radiation, you know that sometimes you just can't manage that. Some days you can. But there is no equity in the medical community for what's available downtown. If you have a child who has to go to the emergency room at the downtown hospital, if the child needs an ICU, they are not equipped downtown, you get sent uptown to handle pediatric emergency level ICU. So there are many considerations that we have to think of here. Again, if we got rid of every single agency parking on the street, if placards all got removed, what would CB1 look like? I surmise it would look unbelievably different. If we had affordable housing and the people who were baristas could afford to live here and not ride the subway, but potentially walk, that would be amazing. We've lost almost all those in the last 20 years downtown. So there's lots of things to consider. We won't solve them all, but the one thing we do is speak for those of us here. So just remember, for Mark, for Mimi, for everybody who is on the committee, for Betty and for Michael and Patrick and everyone else, we don't have to come to an agreement. We just have to get to a majority vote. That is the most important part about working forward. And I'm off my soapbox. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see a bunch of hands up, and I don't know if they're up again or they are meant to be down and didn't go down.
I put mine back up, Betty, so mine is accurate.
Mitch, Detta, also same thing. Is yours up again or, okay, thank you. Mitch?
Yes.
And then Carrie?
You're calling me to speak?
Yes, you and then Carrie.
Okay, sure. Well, then first, very quickly, I couldn't, Mimi's point, I can't agree with more than, I wish I could say more than 100%, but like took the word, I wish I would have come up with those words. And I also agree with Tammy's point. And then I say this with respect to everybody. There's probably many of us that are of the age. If I say, besides the reasons of, the hospitals and the things that Mariana James talked about, you know the expression, there are 8 million reasons in the Naked City. If people remember that show from the 50s and 60s? Betty, you know what I'm talking about? Well, you were in Chicago then.
Well, it's national TV, but I couldn't be that old, could I?
Basically, for those younger people, there was the theme of the show was like it was like a detective show. There are 8 million reasons, reasons in the Naked City being New York, that, besides the medical stuff, and like I said, unfortunately, I've joined the club with Tammy and Mariam of dealing with things with my parents. And, like I said, your heart was in the right place, Betty, but, when you're dealing with somebody that's not in the right mind or something like that, you can't have them wait for Access-A-Ride and then you meet them and, there has to be somebody with them. So on that point, Mark was accurate. But besides that, not a life and death situation. All the tens of thousands of people that work say like on the Broadway theaters. Obviously now everything is down, but there are the people that work forgetting about not just the musicians and the actors, but the stagehands, the ushers. Most people don't live in the district because it's just too expensive. People are coming from the tri-state area, and while a lot of them have to drive home after 11, 12 o'clock at night because of safety reasons and where they live, but they have to come like at 5 o'clock, like before the show starts, or on where they have nights. There's so many, like there's 8 million other reasons why my daughter from Brooklyn has to drive in to see me for certain things, because then after that she has to go up to the North Bronx to see her sick grandmother, and then after that go like out to New Jersey for something for her job. And by taking public transportation, it would have been like a 14-hour commute. So there's so many other reasons. And even though like I agree in principle with what Tammy said, that we have to consider what's best for us down here, since this would affect so many other people in the 5 boroughs, I think we have to consider that also, as somebody that grew up in the Bronx and somebody that, whose family, didn't grow, was here. And my kids grew up in Hell's Kitchen. When it was Hell's Kitchen in the 70s and the 80s, when it was like a no man's land. And, for a couple of years I had a car because I had to take them like what Mariana was doing to 1,000 places, including the hospital for special surgery, back and forth. And there are so many reasons like that, I want the transit system to improve, but that should not come on the backs of us, because we don't anyway. I've already spoken too much. Thank you for listening, Betty.
Thank you. And Carrie?
Thank you. I'm not as knowledgeable about this as I'd like to be, but when you talk about carve outs, are you saying, like, for example, with the hospital situation, because we don't have those services downtown, are you saying that Community Board 1 could propose a resolution that says that for trips to that sort of medical corridor, if you will, that be carved out in some way from the imposition of tax, of the fee? Is that possible? I mean, I thought congestion pricing was just the law and everybody just has to pay. So for people who don't itemize, the tax deduction doesn't mean anything. I get all that. But so if we drive from, here to Weill Cornell, the fee is what?
Those numbers are not announced yet, and those are part of the issues.
Okay. So it's hard for people to know whether or not they can afford to make those trips I mean, or what the burden will be for those who have to make those trips.
You're assuming they're a car owner, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, the majority are not car owners, but keep in mind, as I said, people who are taking taxis or other things, they're already paying it.
So the I'm just trying to get clarification on the carve out. The carve out that Charlie was concerned about and that people don't, I'm just not sure how would a carve out work? What is the process for carving out the payment?
Carve out, yeah, and what it looks like, and that's the question, is what do people want to ask is the carve out? That's kind of what's going to be created. The carve outs that the state created in the law are the ones I covered to give people an idea of what the legislators were thinking when they were thinking of carve outs.
And that's the West Side Highway and the FDR Drive.
Well, saying that if you're not going to go into that area below 60th Street, yeah, we're going to leave you alone because you're not going into the district. If you are someone earning less than $60,000 a year, we will let you take a tax write-off. You collect the numbers. That's their carve out for that group. For the disabled, they really didn't define them. For the business owners, they have the straightforward, they always have business expenses. This would be just another, just as their car is. There are no other specific carve outs mentioned in the law. We have people like police and fire where the unions have asked for carve outs. Again, not defined what they mean. So when you ask about, can we have a carve out going to just the hospital? That would be the question of, is that even logistically possible? Probably not, because they'd have to know where you start and where you end and where you went. The carve out, the only other thing with the law is you're not billed more than once a day for the fee. So for those who are thinking, I go out 4 times during, you're billed once a day. That's something else that's in the law that I did not mention.
I guess my thing, Betty, is if you're billed once a day, $15 a day, depending on how you look. Charles has some really interesting spreadsheets that I hope everyone actually will take a look at, because they have you've shared them before and they have phenomenal information in them. And as part of the research for what we do, everyone should read the report and look at the spreadsheet to understand what some of the conversations have been about.
And I guess that's kind of where I'm going, because like I said, I am taking notes to figure out where people want to go with this. Is the argument going to be tolls? Well, we want to completely opt out and we want the state to turn around and change the law, which is what Mark suggests. Do we say, you know what, it is a law, it's probably going to go into effect. Do we want to go after the way tolls are done, variable tolling? So there are some times of the day that are cheaper, certain days of the week that are cheaper. What are people thinking? Do they want to talk about toll rates? Do they want to talk about, no, we think we should be exempt and we don't want to talk about any of those things. We just want a resolution that says not us.
Betty, or if I don't know how the majority of the board feels, but if the majority of the board feels we're against it, separate from just not us, like we don't support it, that's something that should be considered. But I just wanted to, I do remember, to give you credit, I do remember you did say previously in one of the early discussions that you'd only be charged once, like even if you went like 10 times in and out of the zone on that day. But just to respond to that, and like I said, that was accurate. You did say that before. Why should Mariana be charged one time for saving her kid's life? Like on a regular basis. So yes, if she has to go back 3 or 4 times a day or a couple, but why should you even be charged once, for something like that? And many of us have unfortunately been in those situations. And then it wouldn't just affect car owners, because I'm not a car owner, but they, on infrequent occasions, like anybody else, you have to, whether you rent a car or borrow a car or have, other, like I said, other things come up. But I guess the basic point is to respond to you only get charged once a day, is somebody like Mariana should get charged zero for taking care of the health of her child. So that's where I come from.
Okay, well, actually, you raised another point, so you may want to expound on this a little bit. If somebody rents a car, because Carrie was asking, how do they even figure out, even if you said exemptions for people who live in our district, you rent a car, it's not registered in our district. You would not be considered exempt, even if you got that exemption and really wanted it. You have your daughter come visit you from outside. She's not going to get the exemption.
Well,
she's going to pay more because the people here do have an exemption.
Right. But what I'm saying is that, so then maybe there's enough people on the board that are against congestion price that will not support the law, even though I support the MTA fixing the infrastructure, but through like the government funding, like all of a sudden there was no money, but because of COVID, they came up with stimulus to help people from getting evicted and from not being able to pay the rent and food. It's like all my work is still canceled since last March 5th. But
they're not going to pay the capital.
Right. What I'm saying is that if enough people on the board, you said how we come from, if more than 50% of the people are against this, then I think that we should say we're not in support of that. If more than 50% of the people are for it, then we can get to then the carve-outs or tolls and take it step by step.
Okay, so you recommend just skip this group completely and go directly to the full board and.
No, I'm not saying skip it.
Because our job is to come up with a resolution. Should we do that or should we not?
No, when I said 50% of the board, I meant like the group that you're talking to now. Like our
working group.
Right, the working group, and then the board, because sometimes the board doesn't take the recommendation of the committees or the working group. But
correct.
Like as a committee or as a board, like if 50% or 50.1%, yes.
A working group has to report to a committee. A working group doesn't vote. A working group brings recommendations to a committee. The committee votes, and it proceeds along the normal path.
So then if the majority of the working group, say, agreed with Mark or Mariana, I'm removing myself now, even though I agree with them, then would we make a recommendation to the committee that in principle we're against the law of congestion pricing and we would like the MTA and government to work out in a different way? Or how does that work, Tammy?
Yes, and in a short from me, from the working group, if that's what comes out of the working group, is that's the recommendation that would go to the transportation committee as a somewhat draft resolution sort of thing and say, do you want to move ahead with this, or do you want to adopt it as a recommendation or not? And they'll vote to say yes or no.
Because I just hate for this to become like, getting on, paying to get on, the rich people can afford it. The one or two, I can't afford to take a taxi anymore. Like I had to take a taxi once a couple of weeks ago, and I couldn't believe it. $15 for going a couple of blocks because of all the add-ons, and that's going to increase prices in the supermarket. That's going to increase, everything is going to be passed on to us. So it just doesn't affect car owners in Lower Manhattan. There are so many other things, and I, for one, who takes the train all the time, would love to see mass transportation improve, but not this way, because I think it would hurt too many of the little people.
Okay, well, what I suggest then is, unless I hear from otherwise, I think next month what we'll take on for working group is, do we go this route? Is that the recommendation, or are people going to see further than that and say, MTA isn't going to get better without congestion pricing, because that's kind of the package. Yeah. But let's take that on next month, and I'm much clearer on where we're going, and that's not talking about nuancing anything. It's about being anti-law or not.
Yeah, to start this, I would like to make a recommendation that Lucian share the law as it stands and Charles's spreadsheets, so people can see what RPA and others have used as a basis to understand the dialogue so people are far more conversant and understanding pros and cons.
I'm fine with that. We've gone through this before, so I also suggest you go back and look at some of the past recommendations of readings. But we will talk about that, and if I wanted you to think about where you really want to stand on this, given the new environment, and Lucian, I'll work with you on some things to send out. So thank you,
Together
Tammy.
a special file directory that we can point to the public, so that'll be available for everyone to look at.
That'd be great.
I have my hand up. Can I speak, or when you?
Sure. I was just going to ask if anyone wants to take their hand down, please do. Otherwise,
Okay to go?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of things. The thing about renting a car or a van or whatever the case may be, and you do live in a district, your vehicles are registered in the congestion pricing zone. It's a simple fix. When you get the bill in the mail, if you have Easy Pass, it's just either deducted or credited, or if you don't, you're simply exempt. That's an easy one. One thing I wanted to mention, and I forgot to mention it, is that I went to all the public hearings in the city, and the interesting thing was, and I took note of this because I started noticing it, is that every one that was in favor of congestion pricing mostly were not individuals. There was someone who was representing this group or that group or this special interest or that special interest. And the ones that were opposed were almost exclusively individuals who came up. And not a majority, but a large percentage of those people came up and said, first, I want to tell you, I don't own a car, but this is the reason why I think congestion pricing is stupid, and for all the reasons you've heard in other ones. And that is something to note, that groups that can lobby and afford to lobby and donate to politicians, and politicians that were always against congestion pricing, all of a sudden now they're in favor of it, were lobbying for congestion pricing. But the individuals, the regular citizens, I noticed almost 95% were opposed to it when they spoke. So that, just take that as note. It wasn't just take stat. I went to every single one, and this is what happened at every single borough.
Thank you, Mark. And Mariama? You muted?
Sorry. Yeah, I think that point that Mark just made was huge. But I put my hand back up to an answer to your most recent question as to what we would do as members of the congestion pricing, what we thought we might recommend. And in general, I mean, I can't say that I've ever been a fan of it, but in normal times, I was certainly willing to hear reasons why it might be beneficial and to, perhaps change my mind. I try very hard to base my votes and everything that I do on the community board on what I think, like the constituents, for lack of a better word, they're not necessarily my constituents, but the community board's constituents want or need. And so I wouldn't base it on my own personal needs, especially if that wasn't in alignment. But I think that if you're asking me right now what I would do, I think it's inappropriate during a pandemic for us to be talking about congestion pricing. I think it's ostentatious. Like, look at us, we got money to do a whole big infrastructure project. Too bad for everybody else. And, in terms of calling upon citizens, individual citizens, and Uber drivers and everybody else to take on additional costs, when at the same time you turn around and you say that people can't feed their families, and we look at the news and we see lines, for blocks of people going to pantries and stuff and unable to receive health care and all this kind of stuff. I think it's woefully inappropriate right now. That I'm not opposed to discussing it and being open-minded and fair any other time.
Okay, thank you. And Carrie, your hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I had I have lost my internet connection. I'll go back to YouTube to hear what you had to say, and I look forward to receiving Lucian's documents so that I can learn more about it. No, I didn't mean to raise it again, so thank
Okay.
you.
Great, then I will wind this down since I don't see other hands up. It's 9 o'clock, time to end anyway. We'll take this on next month. Continue from this, it'll be at the end of next transportation. If this is going to take up a lot of time, it may very well move to another time because I don't want transportation to not have enough time to get its business done. We'll see how it goes, but I do want to forewarn you. And thank everybody for coming to the meeting this month.
Hey, Betty, what's the date for the meeting next month?
Lucian, has it been decided yet? Or is it going
So it's the
to expect the first
Tuesday.
Tuesday of the month?
Okay, thank you.
And if you stay on after the meeting, I'll look it up once I close the recording.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, thanks
So
everybody.
Is that the meeting adjourned?
I think that's it.
Okay.
Thanks. Good night.